Hello, and thanks for stopping by. London's museums come in all manner of shapes, sizes and specialities, and depending on what criteria you use to compile such a list, there are at least 240 of them spread across the capital. That figure is prone to change though as new establishments come, whilst others sadly go. Take a look at this London Transport's poster for example, which dates from the summer of 1993, and you'll notice that all of these venues have disappeared in the ensuing 30 years. The only one which still survives in some form is the Cabaret Mechanical Theatre, although they moved away from Covent Garden over 20 years ago. In this video, I'd like to show you 4 such museums which have long since vanished, and in doing so, hopefully give you some idea of what it was like to visit them during their heyday. Depending on your age of course, most of the places we'll be seeing here were open within living memory, so if you have any recollections of them, please do be sure to share them in the comments. The Museum of the Moving Image, or MoMI as it was affectionately known, was, as the name suggests, dedicated to exploring the history of film and television. Plans for this museum were first drawn up in the early 1980s, and after securing funding entirely from private donations, it was officially opened by Prince Charles on the 15th of September 1988. This opening ceremony caused quite a stir, as the future King Charles III used the event to rail against so-called video nasties, which at the time had been at the centre of a recent moral panic. "The tide of filth sweeping Britain must be turned back," he declared in his speech, adding that a museum of this kind draws our attention to the past, to the kind of standards which used to exist. The museum building itself, which has since become part of the British Film Institute, was a clever piece of architecture, having been designed to slot in beneath the southern approach to Waterloo Bridge, occupying a space that was formerly a car park. You can still spot elements of the old 1980s aesthetic today, most notably these domes on the roof, which are visible from Waterloo Bridge, these distinctive round windows, and this red metal framework. Inside the museum, visitors were presented with examples of early moving image projection, reconstructions of vintage cinema designs, and a host of film memorabilia, including some original and very famous costumes, such as Charlie Chaplin's Little Tramp outfit and a black dress worn by Marilyn Monroe in the absolute classic Some Like It Hot, along with a 7-foot-tall model of Boris Karloff, which was used as a prop in the film Frankenstein. There were original animatronic figures on display too, most notably a model used in 1933's King Kong, and this terrifying Medusa figurine, which was crafted by the legendary animator Ray Harryhausen for 1981's Clash of the Titans. Whilst browsing the exhibits, you may well have encountered the museum's costumed guides, who walked around and talked, or in some cases shouted at you in character, such as this fellow, who portrayed a bolshy early 20th century American film director.
"What do you mean what scene is next, George? Don't you ever consult your call sheet?"
Alongside the regular displays, there were also many excellent temporary exhibitions, covering everything from Doctor Who and the history of animation, to the art of music promos, and the video game icon, Pac-Man. There were also quite a few interactive displays inside MoMI, including a demonstration of green screen technology, which allowed you to see yourself flying through the air like Superman, and a studio booth, in which you could have a virtual interview with the film critic Barry Norman. Such displays relied heavily upon electronics and television monitors, which ultimately ended up being too expensive to maintain, and by the late 1990s, things were sadly starting to look a little threadbare. "The whole place has become tatty," complained one disgruntled visitor, writing to the Stage magazine in April 1997. The exhibits were wear-worn by visitors, the acting staff appeared bored to the extreme, and the technical exhibits were either not functioning or just poorly maintained. All in all, they concluded, a very poor day out at what was a prestige, state-of-the-art museum. The writing did indeed appear to be on the wall, and the Museum of the Moving Image closed its doors due to a lack of funds in 1999, although its official closure wasn't announced until 2002. Today, a much smaller successor to MoMI, the Kent Museum of the Moving Image, lives on in the town of Dill, whilst a larger counterpart continues to operate in New York City. As you can see from its current state, the next museum ceased to exist many years ago. Although if you had elderly relatives who grew up in London, it may well be possible that they once told you about this place. In a curious twist, this building also has a close connection with Jack the Ripper, which I'll get to later. First suggested by Kate Marion Hall, who, in her capacity working for Stepney Borough Museum, held the accolade of being Britain's first professional female curator, the Nature Study Museum was unveiled in 1904, its purpose being to educate East End kids about flora and fauna. As such, the museum and surrounding grounds were packed with plants, trees and stuffed animals, as well as a menagerie of live specimens, including lizards, scorpions, tarantulas and centipedes. Tom, the burrow toad, pictured here, was a particular favourite amongst children, and there was a grumpy monkey too, who was known to bite staff and visitors alike. Many of these creatures were brought to the museum by sailors, who'd picked them up on their travels. The museum was just moments away from London's sprawling docks after all, and it was for this reason that locals came to nickname this little institution the Dockers Museum. Exotic beasts aside, the Nature Study Museum was also famous for its beehive, which was located inside the building and linked to the outside world via a small tunnel. Inside, a glass panel on the hive allowed children to see the insects at work. Apparently, this colony produced honey of excellent quality, which puzzled staff, considering the East End at the time was a smoky industrial place where few flowers flourished. The Nature Study Museum proved immensely popular, and thousands of local schoolchildren visited there every year. Sadly though, it was forced to close following the outbreak of the Second World War, and although this was only intended as a temporary measure, it never reopened. As for the Jack the Ripper connection I mentioned earlier, well, before becoming a museum, this building was originally a mortuary, built in 1877 as part of the St George in the East Church. It was here, in the autumn of 1888, that the body of Elizabeth Stride, or Long Liz as her friends knew her, was brought for a post-mortem, following her murder at the hands of the mysterious serial killer on nearby Berner Street, which has since been renamed Henrique Street. Once housed within the former South Eastern Railway's office block, which was controversially demolished to make way for a large redevelopment at London Bridge Station, the Britain at War experience was open between 1992 and 2013, offering visitors a taste of what it was like to experience an air raid on London during the Blitz. After being shown an introductory film about World War II, those venturing inside were taken down in a lift to a reconstruction of a London Underground platform, made to look as it would have appeared to people seeking shelter in the early 1940s. Visitors also had the chance to walk through a mock-up of a bombed-out street, and the museum was dotted with rather unsettling mannequins. There was even this one of Winston Churchill, along with an array of wartime paraphernalia, including posters, gas masks and incendiary devices. Although no doubt a worthy endeavour, some of the promotional material for the museum was, well, in my own personal opinion at least, a little tasteless. A slogan outside the building, for instance, invited people to experience the adventure of war-torn London, whilst adverts in the press boasted that the special effects were on a par with those at Universal Studios. That's all very well, but bear in mind that just around the corner from where the Britain at War experience used to be, you'll find Stainer Street, where, on the night of the 17th of February 1941, 68 people were killed and a further 175 injured when a large air raid shelter within the tunnel took a direct hit. Not really the sort of disaster that's suited to being recreated with dazzling special effects. Such sensationalism is nothing new though. In early 1945, some months before the war had even ended, a vaguely similar exhibition opened at number 60 Oxford Street, offering the public the chance to gawp at 100 wax figures related to the conflict, including, unbelievably, a diorama demonstrating the horrors of a concentration camp. This image of the entrance to the Tacky exhibition was taken by a photographer named Wolf Szusicki, who happened to be a Jewish refugee from Vienna. Walking one day along Oxford Street towards Charing Cross Road, I came upon this shop front, he later explained. I was too revolted to go in and investigate. Once located within a grand residential building on a quiet street in Bayswater, the London Toy and Model Museum was a truly lovely place, and very much missed by those who experienced it. The museum was first dreamt up by Alan Levy and David Pressland, two toy collectors who'd written several books on the subject. Funding for the project came through Alan's wife, Nerissa, who hailed from the Thai royal family. Her father and uncle, Prince Chula and Prince Bira, had themselves held a keen interest in vintage toys, and Nerissa herself was an avid collector of rare teddy bears. Opened in May 1982, the London Toy and Model Museum was spread across several galleries, amongst which you would have found model trains from Britain, Germany and America, along with other mechanical models, classic Meccano sets, and collectible bears. Temporary exhibitions were held too, one of the first being a retrospective devoted to dinky toys. A train set puffed its way along a circuit laid around the building, and in the museum's garden there was a larger miniature railway, which children could take a ride on. Other outdoor attractions included a Victorian fairground organ, a 14-foot-long model of a coal mine, and a vintage double-decker bus, which kids could explore, although such exhibits led locals to complain about the noise. In the late 1980s, the museum was sold to the Japanese Fujita Corporation, which was owned by another toy enthusiast named Kozaki Fujita. Kozaki spent £5.5 million on refurbishing the museum, and despite being somewhat off the beaten track, it was soon attracting around 120,000 visitors per year. Sadly, Kozaki died in 1995, although the museum kept going. In 1999 though, the corporation declared it was no longer profitable, and, following an exhibition devoted to Paddington Bear, the London Toy and Model Museum closed for good, with all of its contents being auctioned off. In the wake of this closure, London still had another toy museum which children could visit, that being Pollock's, on Scala Street, just off of Tottenham Court Road, which had a history dating back to the 1950s. And with its colourful circus-like atmosphere, was even said to have inspired the creative mind of a young David Bowie. Unfortunately, Pollock's recently became London's latest museum closure, having been forced to shut down following a change in the building's ownership. As such, they're currently seeking storage space, and potentially, and hopefully, a new site for the museum. If you'd like to help out, I'll leave a link to their campaign in the description below. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look at some of London's lost museums. Remember, if you have any memories of these long vanished places, please do be sure to write them down in the comments, as I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much to all of you who support my channel with your kind words, likes and shares. I couldn't do this without you. If you haven't yet subscribed to Rob's London, then I'd appreciate it very much if you could please consider doing so, as this, along with clicking the bell icon to receive notifications, will ensure that you don't miss out whenever I publish a new video. Plus of course it would be wonderful to have you along. If you're feeling extra generous, you can also support my work with a tip via either my Ko-fi account, which I'll link below, or the YouTube thanks button, which appears as a heart icon beneath the video. Any such financial donations are of course greatly appreciated, and they really do help go towards creating content. Anyway, on that note, thanks again for watching friends. Stay well and please be sure to stay tuned.